Hello, and welcome to the Cat and Sam show. I'm Cat, and this is Sam Beckinsale. And we have two guests today, which are Bonnie and Trish, and they are from The Fire That Took Her, the documentary. Hello, guys. Hello, Bonnie. Hello, Trish. And then we have Bethany. Bethany's kind of old hat here. She pops in every now and then, although we're starting a new channel with her. So, you want to start off, Sam?
Well, I mean, firstly to say, not only the film, the Fire That Took Her, but Judy's story itself and what she did is just extraordinary. It is the most incredible documentary, but event as well, in terms of her bravery and her determination, and you as a family, and you, Bonnie, and Tricia, for getting all of this together and getting the story out. And firstly, I'd just like to say thank you, because it's just phenomenal, and I think everybody should see it. And I think there's so much in it, I almost don't know where to begin. So other than thank you to you both and the production company and everything, but mainly to Judy herself and you as a family. It almost leaves you unable to speak and unable to ask questions and things about it, because there's so much I want to talk to you about. But is there anything that you'd like to begin with around that? Maybe explaining a little about what the film is and why you made it?
Oh yeah, why did we make it,
Bonnie?
I was just there. Trish made the film.
That's not true. So I found the story. I'm a domestic violence survivor myself, and I found the story, and I, apart from being moved by it and being surprised that, it wasn't sort of front page news. It was sort of more a page A16 story while this woman was setting American legal precedent, which I thought was worthy of a front page. It was also a story that I needed at the time, right? I needed this story of a woman who was three-dimensional, who didn't fit the perfect victim sort of stereotype, which so few domestic violence survivors or people who've experienced domestic violence do, who, sort of refused to play this role of the passive victim in her story and instead transformed herself into the hero, right? So I needed that story, and I knew if I needed that story that there were a lot more women out there that needed that story told well and told from Judy's point of view. Because I think a lot of times that when domestic violence does get covered in an in-depth way, which is, in my opinion, not often enough, it's often from this sort of institutional point of view, right? Like the police solving it, or, what the court system is doing. And I wanted to try to raise Judy's voice so we could paint a portrait of what it looked like from the inside. So those were my motivating factors. And I saw it, and I stalked Bonnie on Facebook, and you can tell the story from there. There were a couple months of phone calls, and I came down to Ohio, and
Trish showed up by herself with the camera and not a lot of money. And she just began filming. And interesting enough, I hear about people watching the film and talking about the family dynamics of it. But if you talk to myself or family members, we have watched the film and we think to ourselves, how did she get that on film? So it wasn't, it's interesting to me that the documentary, Trish made this documentary, that it wasn't like, okay, now stand in your kitchen and have a conversation. It was like she filmed, how many hours would you say you filmed with us?
I think it was close to 100 hours of just footage. I mean, some of it is literally just people sitting doing their homework for an hour or eating spaghetti, you know, because you never know.
So it was in a very real, raw environment. So what you see in the film is truly hands-on emotion, raw, in the moment. I think we just really didn't know that we were being filmed or that was really going in the documentary, because I think on some level we kind of just became used to Trish, I guess, you know, and when you're many hours, right? So when we watch the film and you see the different dynamics or moments, it's truly what went on. And that to me is, it's interesting to see from the outside looking in on a camera, right? Someone's just filming it in the raw moment of things.
Well, and I think some of that too is just how the Bose Malinowski family are not, they're not flappable people, right? So I think one of the things I loved about working with you guys is you don't care about glitz or glamour or prestige or let me dress myself up for the camera. You guys were in your life and fully committed to that, and we're pretty unshakable there. And I think that's a big part of why we were able to get some of the stuff that we got.
Yeah, I personally loved the fact that it came across that way, that it was just real. It wasn't fabricated. It wasn't, a flash. I mean, there was so many things that happened. One of the things that I think was really good at the beginning of the movie was to give you a sense of Judy and who she was and her laughter and her, just the spirit of who she was, tied in with the trauma that actually really spoke to me in how a victim feels. Because they're taken in that way. They're taken to those places of happiness, and then they're taken into that trauma back and forth. And I just thought that was brilliant. In my hope is it hits people, in the chest that don't have any idea that that's what it feels like. And that was one of the things that was my takeaway at the very beginning. And like Sam said, there's so much to there that you both did and that your families did that just, brought me to tears, and it triggered me in some ways from things that have happened in my past. But gosh, listening to Judy, she had such a strong voice, and I just love the fact that you guys allowed people to come in and view that voice and see who she really is as a spirit. Because she's amazing.
She is, and that's what I was going to say, is her strength. So there's what I think you've captured so well is, there's this myth that somehow domestic abuse targets or victims are weak people, and all of the everybody that I've come across, it's actually the complete opposite, and things may happen to us like with Judy, where then how many women through how many decades have ended up medically addicted. In the 50s and 60s it was Valium, that was known as mother's little helper, and to have got herself over that, and then and still managing and still coping and still fighting forwards, even when she's being undermined all of the time by her perpetrator. And I think you really captured right at the beginning, you could see the same Judy all the way through, from at the very beginning, without the just the attack. You know, we all have a vulnerability. We all have lots of vulnerabilities. The difference is, I think we've got a saying over here, pivot to the perpetrator. And I think you did that so well. You captured Judy's strength, left her being human, so she had vulnerabilities, which we all have, but you did pivot towards her perpetrator, and he was the focus as just as much. And I just thought it was brilliant. I think it's brilliant. And even with the police as well, it was really interesting with the police. I mean, there were times when I literally shouted at the screen, because on the one hand, the fact that the police who came to her after it was almost like there on a plate, in a way, when he'd attacked her, and it's on film, but the fact that they moved so quickly and got it so quickly, but prior to that, all of that time prior to that, officers had ignored it. So it's this real hit and miss, which again happens all over the world. And when Mike wanted to be, it makes me clench toes and fists when Mike was saying that, even through to the very end, when Mike was saying that it is Mike, isn't it, the perpetrator? See, I've forgotten his name. I want to wipe him from my memory. When he said that he wanted to be in the room with her during her deposition, and he wanted her to see him, and he wanted to question her. Now, we've just had that put in law that they can't do that. This is something that all perpetrators have been doing in order to silence their victims. So, like I say, the layers that are in there are just phenomenal. And at the heart of it, this exceptionally strong woman who fought as best she can. I think she's just amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm curious, what point were you shouting at the screen?
Well, there was a couple of times, but particularly when they were saying that he wanted to be in the room with her when she was giving her deposition, because that level of control still, and the fact that we have literally just had that put into the domestic abuse law here to stop them from doing it. And the reason I was shouting at the screen was, if these perpetrators are doing the same thing the world over, exactly the same thing, why can we not prevent it more? We can see those connections. We can see those patterns. He will have been patterned all the way through from the moment he met her. You know, we have a financial and economic abuse over here has finally, and post-separation has finally been put into law. And the fact that he controlled her via something. Well, he did control her through money, in the sense that he insisted on buying her drugs, but the controlling her through the drugs was just like, how can the police have not looked when they were reading out the list of his prior convictions? And I'm like, what were they playing at? What were they playing at all those times she called him? And why was that not coming up time and time again? I couldn't believe it when the list went on and on and on and on.
Well, Bonnie was speaking into that when Bonnie was talking about in the film. She said, you know, he came over and was like telling me about his tax, and that I should accept him based on my Christian faith. And he knew right where to go.
Because that took me right to my knees at that point, because my faith is so strong and Judy's faith was strong. So how could you question someone who says, why are you judging me? If you love God, and God says to love your neighbors and judge ye, lest you be judged, and all the things that he was smart man he knew to say, right? Unfortunately, I let my guard down, thinking that I was doing what was right, thinking that Judy and I came to the agreement that the girls would not meet him or go anywhere or be there when he was at her home, but then he began to manipulate me into the manipulation by, I didn't know he took Judy drugs, and then he started to tell me she relapsed, she's on drugs, you need to give me money and I'll pay the rent, and give me your money and I'll pay your gas bill. Oh, and then he would say, well, I can't find her, she's passed out. But I had no idea that he was taking money from me, or he was taking money and buying her drugs. I was thinking that he was helping her, like he pulled me into this trust thing against my gut. My gut said, I think as moms, we just have this, my gut just, from the moment.
Be really gentle with yourself, because that's exactly what they do. They come in and move in and into a spot that is sensitive to you. And then we beat ourselves up saying, well, I should have known better, or I should have gone with my gut, or, they just go in. I tell people all the time, I really believe this. You don't understand until you've been there. And you simply trusted the wrong person. That's what happened. You simply trusted the wrong person.
I think a lot of people, if they haven't experienced abuse or watch a loved one experience, abuse, think that these guys come with a sign, like that you can tell they're a gruff, aggressive man, and they're not charming, and they're mean, and they're dismissive, and they're misogynist, or they're this, or they're that, whatever. And that's exactly the opposite of the case. I mean, these are, at least in my experience, and my friends who are survivors, my own experience, these people come with the charm, and they're very, very good at doing what they do. I have yet to hear of an abuser who abused one person and then, completely reformed on their own, right? This is usually a habitual behavior. You see it in the records. You see it in the system failing to stop them when they offend over and over and over again. And, they're able to do this over and over again because they're very charming and they always have an excuse, right? I remember growing up and hearing women who are older than me say, well, watch out if he has a bad relationship with his ex, or if he has a bad relationship with whatever. We're all told that. And then there's some story and there's some reason and it usually sounds pretty darn plausible, And I think that's a pattern with most abusers. And Michael was a very effective abuser, but I don't think Michael's uncommon in the sense that I think most of these guys show up and they can really work a room. That's how they're able to do what they do.
Well, even his own solicitor, when he was in the hospital bed at the very beginning, and said, he was quiet, he was humble, he was, he was all of these things that I think with a different officer coming in would have just accepted his version of events, and it would have just gone down on his record. He obviously knew how to be in front of a police officer in that situation, and when it became obvious, he knew how to do it because he'd done it so many times before. And no, he's not special. You're absolutely right there, Trish, because this is the thing. Actually, they aren't that special. They're so common. What they do is so common. Like Kat and I have talked before. We don't know how many times we've heard, do they have a manual, or is there an abuse school that they go to, and we can recognise it in each other. And like Kat could hear Bonnie then just sort of saying, it's those same things of, it's my fault, or I got, he was able to play me. They are practiced. And I like your phrase, Tricia, actually, effective abusers. They're good. That's good.
You got something to say over there, Bethany?
I was actually going to say that that actually is part of what I talk about in the poem that I wrote. I watched your film last night, and I was up all night. It was just, it was a lot to process. But I think that's the point. And I told my parents that. I said, I think that's the point, that it's a lot to process because it creates a conversation. Especially just the fact that y'all were so raw about her history, and you were honest about her drug use and the continued abuse, and that made it so real for me, because it's no longer just another story, right? It's, you know what, yeah, like everyone goes through this, everyone copes with it in their own ways. And so I was just sitting there thinking about it, and y'all kind of touched on it a little bit recently, where we're talking about he was trying to silence her. And I haven't titled this yet because I just I cannot come up with a title that does it justice. But I would like to read it to y'all if that's okay.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
All right. I'm so excited. Okay. A whisper is loud if uttered in silence, but a scream is silent if surrounded by noise. And that's how they do it. They make everyone question your sanity, question your clarity, question your ability. They portray themselves as the hero, the one always protecting you from yourself. They find your weak spot and exploit it, then use it against you. They tell you your memory is slipping and you exaggerate too much. They know how to play your loved ones and pit them against you. They threaten you with law enforcement and use the kids as collateral. They force you to depend on them, so getting out is harder. They leave marks, burns, and bruises, then create stories to cover them up. They maintain their innocence, knowing all along the damage they caused. The thing is, they choose to surround you with noise because if there was silence, your whisper would be too loud.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
You get it.
I tried to there was a lot of parallels between Judy's story and mine. I believe Judy was 31 when she passed away, and I'm 31. And so I'm honored to be able to be part of this. And I'm honored to be able to be that voice for her and for the others that have lost their voices because of this. And I'm so, so grateful for this film.
I can't thank you enough. And when I seen you, on the webcam, I just felt so honored to see you, and just it felt a little sliver of that view that she's not here. She looks somewhat like you, dark hair, as you see in the film. I just thought maybe there's a piece of her when I first got on this podcast, and then you read that poem, and it was ever so. Judy couldn't have written it better herself, and Judy could write poetry beautifully, and she never hear anymore to do that. So you really hold a special spot to me from this moment on through this journey with Judy. So I can't thank you enough.
I just want to hug you right now. Oh my God.
It means a lot that this is a woman who's worthy of poetry and worthy of films and worthy of attention and worthy of people talking about her and worthy of, claiming her rightful place in history, because that's what she did. She made history. Like that precedent, that law, that is American history, that is women's history. And I think there's like a certain level of validation, right, for what she did that also comes through this, because it's just, for every Judy, there are a lot of women who disappear, who are, killed, who are maimed, who are taken out of the game in one way or another, just because of the psychological damage is so great. And we're not able to write them poems because we don't know where they are and we're not listening to them. You know, and one of the things that means so much about what you wrote there to me is that you have your eye on this sort of constellation of issues, or the system that is keeping women trapped in these situations. And I think those are solvable problems. I think a lot of those are solvable problems. It's just that we are unwilling to solve them. We are unwilling to talk about them. When we were pitching this film, you wouldn't believe how many no's I got. we started this 5 years ago here, right? And like in this room, we started this 5 years ago. And I thought naively at the time, because we were talking about Me Too and all that maybe I would get some help quicker than on my past projects. And just because it was in the zeitgeist, it was in culture, this women's issues. And I was so wrong, because time and time again, when I pitched this film, people told me she was too tough to look at. The story was just too sad. One person wanted to finance a film, but asked if I could make it without showing her face. And we said, no, absolutely not. Because looking away from her is, first of all, is abominable in its own right. Second of all, is to look away from every other woman. It was 1 in 4 forever, but I recently read a statistic that says now it's 1 in 3 women that experience domestic violence. Looking away from all of them, you know, and every bit of it, right? We're not just talking about this. It doesn't only do damage when someone dies and goes through the court system. It does permanent damage to women, even, you know, at the mildest end of the spectrum. It's not mild. It's life affecting and incredibly destructive. And so, you know, thank you for not looking away, and thank you for like commemorating her and looking at how that issue connects to other women. That's really what I hope. I hope this film does well enough that it's able to do that, and that other women are able to see themselves in Judy, because I did. I mean, my story is different, right? I didn't struggle with addiction. I didn't get physically harmed to an extent that those injuries were permanent. You know, none of the injuries I had were permanent injuries. But I still felt so much like her. And, you know, and the thing for me was like, when I went to go try to report this guy, which went terribly, because often you go into the police and you become a suspect when you're trying to report as a victim, which definitely happened to Judy on numerous occasions. But, you know, I was convinced that if it was like texts I sent, it was like when somebody was being abusive to me and I sent nasty texts that didn't sound like me. And I felt so much shame that those would become a part of the public record. I was afraid. And it's like, this person was terrorizing me. This was a person who would stand on the balcony of our apartment and tell me to jump, and tell me no one loved me, and trap me in rooms, and all sorts of, you know, violence as well, physical violence. And I thought, well, but they'll see that mean text I sent him. Of course I sent him a mean text. You know, of course I was not myself while I was being terrorized, right? But the world doesn't get that. And like, Bonnie, you were telling me last night, somebody said something about Judy's addiction. Do you want to tell that story?
About her, she wouldn't have, she put herself in that situation.
Yeah.
I hear a lot. People will come back and say, well, you know, if she hadn't abused drugs, she wouldn't have been in that situation and she'd be here today.
Well, see, that is the classic victim blaming, and that is there is a movement to move away from that, and that's part of what I think your film, what The Fire That Took Her, will really go towards. And Patricia, you're absolutely right in everything that you say. And the coercive and controlling behaviour, it started with Judy and Michael. The minute he met her, the minute he targeted her from the off, he targeted other women in exactly the same way. It's that patterned coercive and controlling behaviour. And I do just have to say, you know, we know now that domestic abuse happens to anyone and it is perpetrated by anyone. And there is nothing whatsoever that we do to let it happen to us or make it happen to us. It is the perpetrators who choose to do it. Michael chose to do everything that he did, including setting her on fire. And that is what is in your, that's what's, you've just done it so brilliantly.